materials, the success of growth of our movement, the building movement. There are also some tangible campaign successes. Getting a product on the shelves, getting Friends Fiduciary to divest. I want to remark about something here about the South Africa labeling settlement products clearly. In this they joined also with Denmark and the UK that are regulations that are not required regulations, but there are regulations about labeling clearly settlement products. And also a new policy by the EU that requires, of course, taxes on settlement products. That's really hardened its line towards Israelis now, and they, even though they were looking the other way for a long time, as far as I think, but I think now they're really going to inspect it more carefully, and there are many voices inside the EU calling for a total ban of settlement products, and the Israelis are quite afraid of that. And we can talk more about settlement products if you want. Why are they afraid of that? Why is that such a big deal? But all of these successes coming from Europe in the last year, there are many also movement successes. Veolia banned from several contracts, mainly in the UK. But many of the big victories coming from Europe in the last year were actually sanctions-like victories. They are government-level decisions. Labeling, banning. There is a recent decision by the Norwegian government announced by the Minister of Finance in Norway that they would stop giving tax-deductible status to funds that support settlements. Okay? That's amazing. Now, is it really action or speech? We keep saying that BDS is moving from talk to action. But there is only one such fund that receives this tax-deductible standard from the Norwegians. It's symbolic action. And also most divestment action is symbolic action. Friends Fiduciary is divested from HP and from Caterpillar and from Veolia, thank you Anna. Veolia, I keep forgetting the name. Okay. It's a moral symbol. It's Friends Fiduciary, it's the friends. You know, they set a moral precedent. It's not about the money. TIACREF has divested from Caterpillar in the social choice account, and at the same time they bought more share in their other accounts. So Caterpillar didn't lose any money, but they lost part of their good reputation for investors. So much of the work we are engaged in is symbolic action. Okay? So I want to give just, I have 5 remarks that I want to say about successful campaigns, BDS successes, and then we will open the floor for more discussion about any of these things that happen. But first I want to participate in the exercise myself, because my example for this session is definitely the Sonoma County Human Rights Commission discussion on Veolia, whether or not to recommend an investigation of the company to the county, because Veolia operates buses, Veolia Transportation operates buses in Sonoma County. Both Anna and I and many people here, and definitely Nick who is here, were in that remarkable session. Who was there? Well, Nick. Oh, and Nick also, of course. I forgot. And Sydney is gone. But it's okay. We love Sydney. So, I want to say that this was a remarkable day for me. We walked into that session. We presented our case. There were 2 VPs from Veolia who presented their outrageous case. We will talk more about that, I'm sure, this afternoon. And we left that place walking on clouds. I did. I was floating, and we lost the boat. So why was I floating? There's something about the state of our movement, I think, in the floating sensation that we need to think about. So first of all, there is a dedicated workshop to the work of the North Coast Coalition for Palestine. It's a wonderful group that organized this campaign and still working on this campaign in Sonoma County. So Nick is giving this workshop just after this, so you're invited to come to this workshop, and that doesn't mean that there are no other good workshops. You should come to all of them immediately at the same time. But I don't want to take too much of the time talking about that, because this is where you need to discuss that event. But I want to say that We were there, we were stating our case, we were there for 4 hours of testimonies. And about 70% of the people in the audience, which was a big audience, were testifying. And they were testifying about themselves, about what they witnessed, about what they feel about taking a bus in Sonoma County, about segregation as they saw it, as they felt it, as they experienced it. And the other side, and there were people there who were speaking up for the audience, there were other company employees, or the company corporate lawyer, who was creating all sorts of crazy allegations against a local activist group, which is outrageous. They were using intimidation, legal intimidation. Some of them were speaking and making all sorts of weird things about how we're Nazis that want to try and destroy the world. And it seems like there was no real discussion. I mean, it was obvious that whatever people who were there, and we could hear it later in the deliberation between the committee members, the discussion was not about is Veolia right or wrong, or is there segregation or not, or are checkpoints good, or are these buses supposed to service settlements or not. And this was not their conversation. Their conversation was about what can we do. And it really reminds me also of the church investments initiatives that we heard about in the previous panel. The discussion is about, hey, what can we do? And can we do it? Do we want to go to this step of doing? This is where we are. This is amazing. This is a great success for us. We have completely shifted the discourse. The opposition is engaged mainly in manipulation behind the scene and push down, top down pressure and intimidation of all sorts, but they are not really party to the conversation anymore. We have the discourse, so we need to capitalize on that and build on that and consolidate that. This is our goal for this coming year, I think. So I did have 5 short remarks. This was not counted, okay? And because I wanted them to be very, very short. So one of them, I think, is definitely nonviolence. The theory of nonviolence. How does nonviolence work? Nonviolence is not just the fact of not using violence. It's not about that. It shouldn't be also about judgment calls about other people's actions. But it is about the fact that you can create, in nonviolent direct action, you can create these morality plays. You can create these scenes where it is clear what is going on. You have to create a clear distinction between you and the opposition. If the opposition is coming there in order to shout all sorts of negative shouts at you, that's not what you're doing there. If they're coming there in order to stifle debate, you're there in order to speak. Nonviolence is all about communication. We are constantly trying to engage with the other side in order to convince them, because they have a place in our vision. We are not trying to defeat the other side. And that's very important for us to remember. We are constantly trying to get them to join us. There's always a chance they will join us, and if we are going to win, they will join us. And they will say, they join us. They were part of this all along. And we have to give them the chance to do so, because we want to win. That's our win. So, for example, one of the most successful BDS campaigns was a campaign against Alexco, the Israeli export company. Not very well known here, but in Europe, this is the company that sold and marketed something like 50% of all the goods, agricultural goods of Israel. It was also half government owned. And the campaign against Agrexco was so successful that Agrexco actually declared bankruptcy and went into liquidation in 2011. Now, a short disclaimer, of course, with this commercial world, it's not just the campaigns that did it, but they had an effect in a rough time for the company. That's why they couldn't get credit. This is why they couldn't really pull out of that place where they got. They couldn't open a new port for themselves in France because of strong opposition and constant demonstrations in France against that new port where they wanted to expand, and so on and so forth. This is a huge victory, but it's also a real problem. Because now the Israeli agricultural goods are sold by many small competing exporters. It's much harder to fund them. We are short of good targets. You know, we don't have many good targets. So sometimes we have to take good care of them, you know, cherish them. Yeah, we are very much against what you're doing, and we are so sorry that you keep doing that. But on the other hand, it's okay. Give us another year, because we're leaving our movement on your backs. We need you. Look at Veolia. Veolia is trying to run out of the occupation in all sorts of ways. They're really trying hard, I have to tell them, give it to them. They are not very successful, which is great, because they are a global corporation and we can build a global movement around it. So, nonviolence. Another thing about nonviolence is that nonviolence is one of the best tools to deal with violence. In fact, the best. Part of the reason why nonviolence works is because the opposition is making crazy, stupid mistakes. And we have to be ready for them. HR 35, you know, it's a horrible, horrible state legislation announcement that puts BDS with a whole lot of other examples of anti-Semitism and illegitimate speech on campuses and so on. Horrible decision. But this is the kind of thing that is so outrageous that it can bring up our results. And we have to be ready for these things in order to react. And now we have, as one of you said, of course, the decision of the Student Association in California, of the UC Student Association, which actually joined BDS. They call for divestments and they reject this decision. This is amazing. This is amazing. And it happened because of their resolution. We shouldn't be overly outraged. I mean, outrage is okay, but not surprised when the opposition does one of these stupid things. We should be ready to capitalize on that and use that. And many times I hear like students who organize in order to disrupt the speech by some guest on campus, and one is being punched in the face or arrested, and they are completely horrified. Well, you're going to disrupt the speech. Yes, they are going to react. You have to prepare for that. And you have to make the best of that. And you have to remember we are part of the nonviolent movement. We are not part of the punching. It's not just don't punch back. It's nonviolence. Nonviolent direct action is many times seen as a provocation. And many times it is a good thing to provoke because we are trying to change the status quo. We are not invested in what's going on. We want to move it ahead. My next remark is about communication. So nonviolence is always about communication, and I told several people here who heard me speak before about the language thing. There is a religious concept in Hebrew which is called cherem, which is a translation of boycott, like haram in Arabic. You know, cherem is a religious term that means excommunication. And it's part of the reaction to the boycott, the Western sanction movement in Israeli or Hebrew-speaking audiences. They say, oh, they want to boycott us, which means excommunication, it means social death. They don't want to have anything to do with us. They don't want, you know, they want to kill us socially. But that's not the kind of boycott that we are advocating. The kind of boycott we're advocating is the Martin Luther King boycott, or it's the Gandhi boycott, or it's the Great boycott. It's a boycott that is all about the strike. It's about non-cooperation. It's about we are using whatever we can in order to get the conversation going. We want to talk. We want to be heard. We want people to see that we are part of this conversation and we have some power to change things. So our goal is always to communicate, and create more conversation. Even when we get to places where we are portrayed as the censorship side, and the example I want to have is another victory we had, which was the discussions around the pink washing events. Remember there was a pink washing tool that came, still comes, many different types of such tools, but there was one that was in the West Coast, in Northern California, and Washington State and Oregon. And when they reached Seattle, local group of organizers have managed to speak to the LGBT commissioners in the LGBT Commission in Seattle and get them to cancel the event. So it sounds very much like silencing and censorship. But in effect, if you go into the content of that event, what happened there was that they created an actual discussion about the status of lesbians, gays, transgendered, bisexuals, queers in Israel, Palestine, by bringing community members, Jewish and Palestinian, by centering the Palestinian discourse, the Palestinian queer discourse, which is always erased, which is always forgotten and exploited, to bring it center stage and to have people in the community speak up about what it means for them to be a lesbian Palestinian and so forth. And the commissioners were so moved by that they said, yeah, that state-sponsored event which is scheduled for tomorrow is not the kind of conversation we want to have because it is silencing people in our own community. So the idea is to create more communication, not less communication. The target audience of this communication. We have all sorts of things going all over the place. We want to talk to everybody, we want to talk to the opposition, we want to talk to the policemen who arrest us. But who is the target audience we're trying to influence? I think it's actually the liberals. This is about consolidating what we have. We need the progressive liberals in this country to identify Palestine as their issue. We need them. And that's our state. This is where we're at. We don't have them yet. I'll say just two more words about that and then open the discussion. I think we don't have much time. Oh, goodness, we're late. The title I gave for this session was Putting Occupation on Trial. This is after Anna. Anna said that after we came out of the Sonoma County conversation. She said, tonight we put the occupation on trial. And I'm sorry, I think Nick also used that in the title for his workshop. It's very appropriate. That's how we felt. But thinking back on that, my remark is that maybe we didn't put the occupation on trial because everybody spoke against the occupation. You could see that also in the church divestment discussions. Everybody spoke against the occupation. The opposition came up with all sorts of ideas of how to send more money to the Palestinian economy. Come on, you know, that's what they're doing now. Yeah? So we didn't just put the occupation on trial. What we are putting on trial is ourselves. What can we do? Can we take the next step? Can we decide that our church will divest? Can we, as the Human Rights Commission of Sonoma County, take a stand on that and see the local issue of human rights? What can we do? Can we take it? This is what is really on trial here. And this is about accountability. Our accountability is our power to change things. BDS is about tracing the lines of accountability back to us. There's no clean hands. So anybody who practices this clean hand boycotts, I have this list. If I don't buy anything on this list, then I'm exempt. You know, I have no stake in the occupation, and I'm a good person. No, you're not a good person. I mean, you might be a very good person. But you haven't really cleared up all these lines of accountability. Because you're part of this economy, because you're a citizen, I don't know why. There must be some reason. You have to find it, because this is what you need to use in order to change things. So, I'll just give you a short story. I'm sorry, I have to. Yeah. I was working in non-profits in an office in Tel Aviv, which is an Israeli organization, which is joined Palestinian and Jewish, and part of the Coalition of Women for Peace. And we had all these delegations coming to visit us. Some of you also visited us. And there were a delegation of 4 people who came in. They wanted to talk about BDS campaigns and companies and get information. And they had a meeting with us. One of them, this guy, I don't remember his name, he wouldn't step in. He sat outside in the lobby. I offered him a glass of water. He said, I don't drink the water here. I brought my water from West End. Okay. As if we don't drink the water from West End. Where it's coming from. And he was just sitting there. He didn't want to talk to us. He didn't want to step into the office. And the window was open, and the plant on the seal fell down and broke, and he wouldn't pick it up. And I don't think the plant is responsible for anything. So that was really rude, I thought. This is rude. So what I'm trying to say, he looked really stupid. Seriously. Because his fellow delegates came inside and got more information that might be helpful for them in order to go back home and do something. And he would. So that's the clean hands boycott. I'm stepping away, I have nothing to do with it. I'm not drinking the water in Tel Aviv. Good for you. What we're trying to do is shift some of people's reactions on the lines of this is not my problem, or this is not my responsibility, or this is not in my power to change. So we have to bring it home to them. We have to say, this is how you're complicit in this is your problem, and you can change things. So that's what BDS can do. I'm jumping ahead to my wonderful last point, I'm sorry. Shifting the discourse, what we did in Sonoma and in many other places, it's not Israel versus Palestine. What we can use and we use in these corporate accountability campaigns is people versus corporations, which hooks up very nicely to people's new awareness of the fact that corporations have a lot of political power in the US and in Israel. It's a 99% all over again. And when we had someone in the audience who spoke up for the opposition in Sonoma County, and she spoke about how Israel is a wonderful place and it's like the dream, socialist country, I said to her in the break, and she was queer, so I thought like, oh, we can talk. And I said to her that in the break, I said, why are you defending this huge multinational corporation? You're defending Veolia. You're not defending Israel. Veolia is very unpopular in Israel. It really is. They exploit people everywhere. So what can you say? Why are you stepping up to defend Veolia? What's in it for you? It's kind of crazy that you would do that. So this is shifting the discourse. But when we deal with global corporations, we have to remember that this is not dealing with Zionism or Israel. Corporations are global. Corporations can be vulnerable in different parts of the world. We are also global. We have to think globally. When you're engaged with a corporation, don't work by yourself. Try to use our huge network in order to get more information and more hints, and maybe they divide us sometimes. There are many cases when corporations will engage with you separately and with you separately. We cannot have that. Corporations lie all the time. They don't care if you catch them lying. They really don't. We have to know that they have all the information about their own operations. It's really hard for us to penetrate. But we also have to remind that to others. This is how corporations work. They know it. So this can work in our favor. Another thing about corporations is that they are not pro-Israel. Even if they act like they are. Veolia definitely acts like they are. They sent this letter to the commission that looks like it was written by the JCRC or the Foreign Office in Israel or something. They are not pro-Israel. If they can, they run away. They only care about money. And Israel-Palestine is a very small market. So if we give them the opportunity to escape and go exploit elsewhere, they will. And sometimes that's all we need, because we're building leverage from one to the other, from one to the other. They know what happened to that company and this company. And my last point is that BDS is a rights-based approach. We know that, we're calling for basic human rights, and we're using the language of international law and human rights and equality. But it's not just using the language. We should be really sincere about it. We should be really sincere about it. This is our priority. What does it mean? It means human rights are universal. There is a settler organization for human rights for settlements, and they appeal to the UN to be recognized as human rights defenders, which is a special status, special UN status that gives you some protections. They didn't get it because the decision was that human rights defenders protect human rights equally for everyone. Human rights are universal. So if you don't care about Palestinian human rights, you are not a human rights defender, which makes sense to us. But we should also take that to heart. It means that when we go after a company like HP, and this is my opportunity to tell you that we have launched a new coalition in the Bay Area to stop HP. And this coalition will come out next week or in 2 weeks with a new website and a new petition and asking individuals and non-profits to pledge not to buy HP products. So you're welcome to join the coalition. But in order to go after HP, we have to go and see what HP does. And HP works with oppressive regimes all around the world. More than 50% of their revenues come from security contracts. They don't just sell printers. They actually prepare these systems that help regimes manage big populations. They have contracts with the California prison authorities that manage the databases for the prison authorities that are categorizing prisoners and helping control them. They have contracts with ICE, immigration police, that help categorize immigrations and figure out, when are they due for expulsion or whatever. So, if you care about human rights, this is part of your literature. This is what you're telling people. This is a good way to reach out to other organizations organizations and groups that focus on other causes. But this will not retract from our cause. We have this discussion in the coalition. People didn't want that part of the information on the brochure. They said, well, maybe some of the people who care about Palestine don't care about prisoners. And I say, well, that's not our target audience. We have to consolidate our support among the progressives. And our approach is a human rights-based approach. And we care about human rights, and that's universal. And therefore, we have to take it seriously. And that's also answers to one of the worries that says, why are you always picking on Israel? We're not picking on Israel. We want to stop the special impunities that Israel has. We are going to the socially responsible investment industry and talking to people there and saying, hey, it's time that you look at Israel just like you look at any other country in the world. Okay? So, I'll just give one more example of a corporation, which is G4S. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry because I kept telling I have nothing to say, I have nothing to say. G4S, huge target around the world, and a very positive one. It's a terrible company. This is the biggest security services company in the world. I walked into a school when I was giving a talk somewhere, and I said, I have nothing to say, I have nothing to say. And I had some time, I walked into the museum on campus, and in the museum, I saw these guards. They were G4S guards. What better target? There are schools around the world that have student government resolutions to stop working with G4S. G4S also provides security for banks and Bank of America. This is one of the big. They also operate private prisons all around the world, also in the US. They do deportations. They do deportations in Arizona. They do deportations in the UK. They have a record of killing inmates and deportees because they use heavy-handed restraining techniques on people. They're a horrible company. And because of the campaign against this company, the company was forced to announce, still, remember, corporations lie. Announcement is not enough. But they were forced to announce that they were trying to step out of their contracts of supplying equipment to Israeli prisons, in military prisons in the West Bank that are used for political prisoners, and their contracts with checkpoints. They provide scanners and equipment to some of the big checkpoints. They haven't stepped out, they're still there, they're still working on that, and they have other ways in which they are implicated in occupation crimes. But they were forced to announce that. So if a company as vile as G4S was made to make such an announcement because of international law, yes? Because they were afraid for their contracts with the EU. The EU has cancelled one of the big contracts because of their complicity in Palestine. That means that we can get, if we can get G4S to announce something like that, we can get any corporation on its knees. We have the power to do that. Because even if they are not vulnerable here, they might be vulnerable in Denmark or in South Africa, who knows? So I say, let's continue with the victory and consolidate our successes in shifting the discourse by reaching out to more progressives around us and building the support. And don't be too harsh on our targets. You know, we don't have that many. We want them to last.
Thank you so much, Dalit, and she will be mad at me if I spend any more time talking about her and all that she does. So I want to give as much time as possible to questions. We have almost 10 minutes, and so I want to ask that people line up here. We're going to do 3 at a time, and yeah, please, Maggie.
So, this is a great presentation. You guys are both wonderful, great assets to the movement. I don't think we have to be nice to them, but you know. But actually, this is something people can do. How many people flew to the conference? On the way back, pick up the Sky Mall, put one of these stickers on the soda stream. There's nothing illegal about this. It says a free copy, take it, we'll replace it. So it's a free copy, put your sticker on it, leave it in there. Thank you.
Hi. So I want to give a bit of a downer, possibly. There have been great victories in Europe, as you were talking about, but they're all really focused on the settlements, and as you know probably better than anybody, it's the Green Line really doesn't have any significance when it comes to the Israeli economy versus the settlement economy. That distinction is not really meaningful. And I was reading recently about, I can't remember the exact body, but there's some body of the EU that's considering upgrading Israel's trade status with the EU, giving them preferential status as a trading partner. And how do you begin to stand up to things like that? Because that, I mean, that's huge, and that's a big victory for the Israeli economy. So at what point do activists start to look for ways to make the Israeli economy as a whole a pariah, as opposed to just the settlements?
Okay, one more.
My name is Mike Schatz with Occupy Wichita, and I just wanted to make a comment about that G4S. They're also privatizing police forces, municipal police forces. They're starting to have a 5-year plan in the United Kingdom to virtually privatize all of their police forces, and I'm sure they're not going to stop there. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
So first of all, I invite Anna to respond to it that thinks she wants to respond to, because she's not just a pretty face, you know. I think Austin, some of the other ones were, you know, they don't need any response. They're wonderful. There is no green line. Sorry. Green line has significance legally. The settlements are illegal. They are an illegal entity. So when we're using the language of human rights and international law, the settlements are a tool for us to use because they are illegal. But on the ground, in the Israeli economy, in the Israeli production, there is no green line. So what does it mean? It means that if we want to focus only on the products of settlements, it's really impossible. I'm sorry to tell that to the United Methodists and the Presbyterians. It's really very, very hard. Even SolarStream, which is one of our big targets here mentioned today, they have more than one factory. They produce some parts and assemble their devices in the West Bank, in an occupied, in a confiscated, unconfiscated land, in a settlement. But they produce other things in other places. And they can move their production in a few months to another location, if they are under enough pressure. A lot of the things that are produced in settlements are assembly lines, or they are little bits and pieces for other things. It's very hard to trace it. Especially when it comes to agricultural goods, which are a big focus of all of these campaigns in Europe, because a lot of Israeli agricultural goods are coming to Europe. It's almost impossible. I can't tell you how many times in Who Profits I got the same question from our European allies. Does this avocado come from the settlements or not? I don't know. You know, the marketing agency doesn't really know either. And then you have Israeli products that are marketed from the West End, or Israeli products that are sent to a settlement in order to package, or a Palestinian product which is packaged in the settlement and then sold as an Israeli product. So some of it is done on purpose, some of it is just done because it's the same road system, because there is no two-state anything on the ground. Because it is a one-state solution situation, which is not a solution. This is what's happening on the ground. We know that. So what's the point of focusing on settlements? It's a legal tool. It's one case when the law works for us, so we have to use it. And in fact, when you focus on the settlement industry, when you focus on whoever builds the settlements and whoever supports the settlements with infrastructure and services, whoever gives them the money that sustains it, and whoever gives them the legal support, if you look at the industry of settlements, you actually cover the entire economy of the state of Israel. And if you go to goprofits.org and go over our reports, you will see our bank report that shows how all Israeli banks support wineries are using grapes from the occupied territories. It's actually impossible to separate the Israeli economy from the settlement economy. Yes, it's a colonial situation, but the colony is already absorbed by the motherland, if you wish. It was never two separate countries, we know that, yes.
So I wanted to say we're almost out of time, so if you do want to ask a question, we probably have time for two if they're very, very quick. Please start to line up, but I do want to say a few words. So one of the things I've heard Dalit say all the time, and Amar Ributi also says this, is just simply that it's a totally false distinction, as Dalit was saying. Not only in practice, technically, you can separate them, but morally. I mean, why would you boycott a good that was made in settlement, but not the institutions that build the settlement? It just doesn't make sense, or the companies that build the settlement, etc. And when I say institutions, I mean the Israeli government, I mean the Israeli state, I mean the Israeli academic institutions, etc. But it's a very natural bridge because of that false distinction. You know, if you have a clergy member that signs on to a petition that says, I support the Methodist decision to boycott Israeli goods, then we go to that clergy person and say to he or her, so what about the companies that build the settlements? What about the state that supports the settlements and funds them, etc.? It's a really great passage into the broader BDS movement. One thing I wanted to say, the last thing I wanted to say is I think very important. The important thing is that we keep our focus on the rights-based call, no matter what our target is. And I think a lot of low-hanging fruit and really good targets for settlement products is that we're always talking about the three rights. That it's not only about ending occupation, also about right of return, also about equality in 48 Israel, freedom, justice, equality. And furthermore, a campaign that does not focus on those three rights is not officially part of the BDS movement. I'm sorry, if you are simply calling for a boycott of settlement rights and you're not simultaneously advocating the three rights, and I actually just wrote to the BDS National Committee to sort of get clarification on this. No, you're not allowed to call yourself a supporter of the BDS call if you're picking and choosing. So it's not about what target you pick, but your language and the principles behind it that I think is what builds the movement towards justice most effectively.
Hello, I'm Gay Harder from the United Church of Christ Palestine-Israel Network, and something that I have not heard mentioned is I'm a grandparent and I like to buy clothes for my grandchildren. I discovered that there's lines of very cute children's clothes that say Made in Israel, but I've never seen anything about whether they're made in settlements or not, or any campaign targeted for that. And I think that grandparents are a great coalition. We haven't really formed, but what about grandparents who boycott Israeli clothes and toys?
Sherry Madonna, New York. I wanted to just say something about what Dalit said earlier on, because a lot of people here I noticed treat or respond to Madonna, New York as if it's sort of rock stars of the movement. And I want to say one thing about what I think, as somebody who's been a member for a little over years and then moved back to New York, why I think it was so successful. We do not do everything. We try and pick and choose things. We debate out carefully. We actually do a lot of due diligence. There's a great deal of research, and to be very blunt, the actions and the practices always involve some cultural element, some humor element, and actually are planned well in advance. And so we don't try and be at everything because we can't. It's New York City. There's too much to get involved in. We screw up. We make mistakes. Yes, there were ebbs and flows in and out of Occupy, which, by the way, was overall an advantage to us. We just had a teaching yesterday, Occupy Wall Street, not Palestine, of about 30 people. You know, some of them newbies to BDS. We pick things well, and as a result, I mean, it's not like there's dozens. I mean, there's probably 20 to 30 people that come to the twice-a-month meetings in New York, and probably twice that are active on the listservs, and then many, many times that will mobilize and help build for things. But it really, I think the planning, the due diligence, and the humor cultural aspect have been absolutely crucial to the success. And as a result, right now, we have another 6 or 8 people that are entering orientations just this week to join Adalit. We grow, and it has tentacles among many, many young people, and like every other aspect of the Palestine movement is dominated by Arabs and Jews sitting in a room together, collaborating to go after apartheid Israel. But that's the key. Well-planned stuff, not everything.
I will start with the Adalit New York, who are rock stars of the movement. I agree with everything you said, fun and picking your targets, but I will just say a few more words about that. We can think about new campaigns. You know, we can think about them and plan them. It will probably take a while. But we have campaigns already going. So if a group is looking for things to do, try and look up to an existing campaign and pick your goals carefully. Think about goals that make sense locally and make sense to your group, to your church, to your school and so on, but also goals that are not overreaching anything because you want to succeed, you want to be victorious, you want to celebrate. So if you take Soda Stream, getting the store owner of the local store to contact the distributor and ask them some questions, that's a goal. That's a goal because that means that the company gets more and more and more questions from different parts of the country. You know, do your little bit. Remember, we are a global movement. Whatever you can do that has an effect will have a huge effect because it's multiplied by all the people around us. As for the first question about the textile, this is a huge, huge potential project. I'm not saying anything about people's individual choices, and people can make all sorts of individual purchasing choices about what they purchase and what they don't, and what do they do when they see the Made in Israel label. Of course, the media is called says don't buy. But when it comes to campaigns, they are collective efforts. So we have to figure out what would make sense, what would be achievable, and the Israeli textile industry is very complex. In fact, most of the manufacturing doesn't happen in Israel at all. It happens in special industrial zones in Jordan and Egypt. Some of them were actually attacked during the latest uprising in Egypt, which are part of the peace agreement with Jordan and some agreement with the US and the EU, you know, free trade zones, with all the ills and crimes of these free trade zones around the world, just like on the US-Mexico border. If they are produced inside Israel, they are probably produced in very poor Palestinian neighborhoods. It's a big story of the textile industry, and also the way they are sold. Many times it doesn't say on the label made in Israel. You can trace the lines of products. It's very complicated. So I would say we need more research on that.
So I have to close. Rama's been very generous with time, and now we're over time. And by the way, if you have not gone up to Rama and praised her, she is, I don't know where she came from. She is a rock star. So I just wanted to say, you know, there's some exciting stuff coming up later today, and I think, you know, this is really, it's such an amazing thing, everyone in this room, with the different successes that you've had, the different lessons learned, you know, Sherry talking about Adalit in New York, learning about Veolia and the North Coast Coalition for Palestine, that this is really what we want to do, to give that space for all of these different groups coming together, learning from each other, and seeing the way in which all of our different efforts fit into a national movement and a national voice, with our particular niche here in the United States that fits, of course, into a broader global movement for justice in Palestine, supporting the Palestinian people in their struggle for freedom. So really, it's a great honor to be a part of this, and I really encourage people to, I don't even know how I'm going to pick which workshop that I go to, but we have the opportunity to go into more depth and to have more opportunity to share with one another. So have a great rest of the day.
Run off to grab lunch and do workshops. We have
give them your attention.
Okay, sorry real quick, I know you're all hungry. But we're having the second annual Students for Justice in Palestine National Conference in Michigan from November 2nd to the 4th. So like last year we had at Columbia, we had 150 chapters represented, 350 students. We're doing it again this year, but we need a lot of help. We are broke, we are students, and we say alumni. The whole conference is organized by us, and so we could use any type of financial assistance to help students actually come to the conference and be represented, so that we can build a national structure and be more coordinated. So if you have any extra pocket change or whatever, there's a box, it's like the empty half of the AMP table. And if you're a student or if you'd like to donate online, just go to sjpnational.org. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
Other Greenhouse Palestine Freedom Project. Just a quick reminder of a scheduling change. During the second workshop block today at 1:45 p.m. In BSC 251A, we will not be having a social media for Palestine activists that was actually held yesterday. Instead, we'll actually be conducting Train the Trainer, which was originally scheduled for yesterday. And that's going to be an exploration of techniques for preparing for and delivering skills trainings, not only at activist conferences like this, but right back in our own communities. And I would strongly encourage any of you who, especially if you've done this sort of thing before, if you've delivered workshops here or other events, if you have anything to say about that, the more of you folks who come out, I think the more useful it'll be for everybody to attend. So please consider that Train the Trainer at BSC 251A at 1:45.
Last week, the U.S. campaign launched a joint petition with our friends at the Center for Constitutional Rights to have a U.S. investigation into Rachel Corrie's death. And what Phyllis said about the amazing persistence of the Corrie family in her remarks earlier, what we really need to do at this point is to act in solidarity with the Corrie family's ongoing struggle for justice in Rachel's case, now that they've been denied, once again, any form of justice or accountability from the Israeli court system. So, in just a short while, we're going to be launching an open letter for organizations to sign on to. And this is going to be a letter going to the State Department, initiated by us and our friends at CCR, who brought the Corrie v. Cat case in federal court in the United States, demanding a U.S. investigation into her death and the injury and killing of other U.S. human rights defenders. So when that comes out in the next little bit, please do consider signing on with your organization to this letter so that we can have a strong showing in support of the Corrie family and in solidarity with them in their ongoing quest for justice and accountability. Thank you.
Mine's really quick. If anybody's from the Midwest, and I'm not going to determine what states are in the Midwest, it's self-identified. We're going to have, we're going to eat lunch together and kind of talk about some overlapping training opportunities internally, since some of us have a harder time getting to the ones that are further away. So if anybody wants to join us, I guess you'll see a circle of me and Sandra and a couple other people, if people want to join us for lunch.
Thanks. I just want to say, if anybody hasn't had a chance to, or you weren't on Friday here when I talked about the Palestinian Policy Network, which brings together Palestinian thinkers and writers to discuss strategy and policy, and we've written a lot of commentary and analysis and strategic thinking. If you didn't get the information, feel free to pull me aside anytime during the lunch break or during the meeting, and I'll tell you more about it. Thank you.
Hi, Sue Skirman from the Coalition to Stop 3 Billion to Israel in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Inviting you, if you're not tired out from one conference, to go to another one next weekend. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's the Civil Conference, September 28th, 29th. It's not too late to register. If you do want to register, www.
We'll be giving a workshop in the next session downstairs. And ahead of time, I'll be down there. So if any of you have seen these piles of what look like checkbooks and checks and wonder what that's about, I'd love to tell you about this campaign that we're starting to put together to get your input so that it can be as excellent as I hope it will be. But I need to hear feedback, suggestions. What we have produced over there are piles of checkbooks. These are prototypes. You may have suggestions of ways they would be 100 times better, and I'd love to have you involved. So come downstairs if you can. Thanks.
Hi all, two quick announcements. One, there's 4 lax copies of my Palestine primers on the table, and anybody who wants to order them for their organization at half price, talk to me. 2, just a substantive question. Somebody reminded me just now about Gaza. When we talk about the occupation, we tend to talk a lot these days about settlements because it's been so much both in the news and it's so central to the settlement project. But we just need to keep right in the center the fact that the Gaza Strip remains occupied in a different form. It's a different kind of occupation. It's under siege, but it is still occupied. So just a reminder, when we talk about occupation, Gaza's got to be in the mix. Conditions are getting worse in there.